Welcome back to Vintage Steel Garage. Today we're having a look at the Ford Ecoboost low boost. So we're having a look at the Ecoboost boost pressure problem. To be honest, this problem could have been here since I fitted the engine. It's just my daughter's been running around in it low speed just around town, not really noticed the problem. Getting on the motorway, there's a lack of power. Now I've bought myself a new iCar soft diagnostics software which should work on any car, so we'll have a look at that. We're also going to have a little bit of gauges on here, and this is basically there's no sort of vacuum on this anymore, as old cars used to have an inlet manifold with a vacuum. So this is the vacuum pump here. This creates the vacuum first for the brakes there to the brake servo, so we just need to make sure there's no leaks on this, and then this one eventually comes out at this end here where I've just connected in. This was actually connected onto here for the turbo. Right, so that's the actuator there for the turbo, and if I stuck on this pipe, yeah, you'll see that's working. So basically we're looking for suction on here to create boost. If we have suction, you'll see it'll come round like this, and that's going to pull on the gauge. What we've got here in the car is we've got the iCar soft. We've just cleared the fault code which was saying low pressure. We've got this rigged up now. You can see the engine started and it's actually pulling a vacuum of about 12, and we notice when I rev it now, the vacuum disappears. Now what I'm not sure about, because pressure equals dump valve open or dump valve close, the logic at the moment would say on tick over the dump valve, there's vacuum there, so the dump valve should be open, because you wouldn't want boost at standstill, and then when you rev it, it goes to zero, and that's when you get boost. Just been for a short test drive, and I think I've managed to replicate the fault now, which is the first thing to do. I was driving it and the engine's running now, and you saw before that when we were at about 10 HG on the vacuum, we were basically 10 to 15, we were basically able to suck the diaphragm on the turbo, which is basically saying the dump valve is open, so it's bypassing the turbo. When there's no vacuum, when you're driving, it then shuts completely. Now you'll see it's on zero now, the engine's running, and it's making no difference. Now it ran for a while, and all of a sudden there was a bit of a jolt and it lost all the pressure. You can see on the fault code there it says signal amplitude under minimum, and the fault code is P132B at the top, which is linked to vacuum and boost pressure. So what I'm going to do, it does reset itself. I'm going to clear this fault on here, I'm going to turn the engine off and start it again. So there we go, all I've basically done is turn the engine on and off, and we're now at a vacuum of 10. If I rev it slightly, we'll go to 0, and if I back off, it's back up to about 10. Down to 0, back up to about 10. So let's just go for a little drive and see what we can do, and we'll see when that goes down. So it seemed to be under moderate acceleration. I could get it to actually trip and lose the vacuum. So you can see I'm accelerating now. If I back off, it'll come down. If I accelerate, see, and then it just goes a little bit junky there. So if I accelerate hard now, we then get it to go the other way to 20. Accelerating now, and it's going the other way, and now all of a sudden it's dropped to 0, and now even though I've backed off, it's still at 0 no matter what I do. So that's accelerator pressed, off, it's making no difference, so it's lost the vacuum at that point. I've just parked up now, and you can see it's reading 0. Should be reading about 10 or 12 at tick over. So if you go and have a look under here, apologise for the wind, it's a little bit noisy out, but you'll see that the actuator is not actually pulled in on the turbo down there. and there's no vacuum on here at all, very little. You can see where I've teed this in here. Basically I'm going to reconnect this back up and take it from here, which is the source of the vacuum, connect it into here, and we'll have a reading off this while we drive back again and see what. So I've moved this now, so it's now on the actual output, which is, this is the little valve I actually suspect is playing up. So I've moved it from here now, which creates a vacuum. This goes into this module here. So I'm taking the source of it here and running that inside. So we're further upstream now from the turbo actuator, and you can see the actual, we're running at about 20. It's not a steady one, this is just on tick over, so we're just below 1000 RPM, and you can see it's about 20. If I just touch the throttle slightly, I'll get a steadier vacuum, and it's pulling about 25, which actually is good, and that's what it should be on tick over. And then when we back off, we're going to lose it. So when we're actually driving, we're going to lose that vacuum. So let's go for another drive now and see what this gives us. I'll just talk you through what I'm actually doing. Probably really I could have done with a better camera mount, couldn't I really? Anyway, you live and learn. Right, so we're at about 25 at the moment, which is good. I'm just going to repeat it again. It probably actually tripped within about a mile. So we're just going to pull out here. Oh, nice turbo going past. Oh no, C4, very nice. 911 C4, I don't think we caught that, but there we go, in silver. Right, so we'll get it in third. So we're pulling a decent vacuum, which is what you want all the time. This basically should just stay as a vacuum all the time, because this is before the telemetry of telling it what it should actually be sending to the turbo and what it shouldn't. So all the time really we should be getting a vacuum here. But I'm going to see if I can actually trip it into faulting. Apologies for the wind noise. I've got the pipe coming through the window there, so there's not a lot I can do about that. Yeah, so I've actually got a steady 25 on the vacuum all the time now, even though it's actually gone into limp mode. So the fault must be somewhere between the actual vacuum pump and the actual turbo diaphragm, which is that little solenoid that we've seen. So let's get it back home. So we've been for a test run, gained a bit of data and a bit of understanding of how this is actually working now. So to start from the beginning, the turbo itself, this is the wastegate. I may have got my terminology wrong before calling it a dump valve, but this is a wastegate. So basically when this is open, it doesn't create turbo, and when this is closed, it creates turbo. And to create turbo, you need a vacuum here. And we did see a vacuum here about 15 HGs, Huggers. So we were getting a vacuum, but then when it went into sort of a limp mode, this went to 0. Now where does this vacuum come from? On a carburettor engine, because you've got the throttle body, you've got the butterfly valve, that can create a vacuum. These cars with fuel injection do not create a vacuum. So you have this vacuum pump here. This vacuum pump does two things. It creates a vacuum going to the brake servo here, and it creates a vacuum going into this pulse width modulation solenoid for your boost control. So we had the gauge on here when we were driving, and even though it went into limp mode, which gave us 0 here, we had 25 Huggers here. So we know we've got good vacuum coming out of here. Quite often this little plastic device here fails and creates no vacuum. So we're getting 25 into here. This is a vacuum in. Now there's 2 ports after this. One is this one here, which is the first one, which is actually connected to the turbo. So if this is fully on, if you've got 25 here, you'd expect 25 at the other end, and we're only getting 15. The other one, tube here, is a vent that goes back into the inlet manifold. So it's basically a vent to atmosphere, and how this controls the actual amount of boost it's giving. Well, it's not the boost, it's the vacuum to operate the wastegate, and when the wastegate is operated, that creates your boost. So that's what you've got to think of. This is operated by a pulse width modulation PWM signal, and basically this applies voltage to here, and basically it'll do it in a sort of like a square waveform. So the more this is on, the more vacuum it's going to create, therefore the more boost the car will make. Now I think there's something wrong with this, because this is like a sliding valve in here. So this would be, if it was running and you could put your finger on it, it would be sort of vibrating and oscillating, because this is going backwards and forwards, and it's varying the amount of vacuum going to the turbo or going to atmosphere depending on what the load is. Now we could actually just strap it out and give it full vacuum, which would be full boost on the turbo. That could be interesting to try, and I think this is where I got to on the Land Rover as well, and left it in that situation. But what will happen is there's probably corrosion in here or moisture in here, and it will make this stick, or the grease is sticking. It's not really a serviceable item, but I'm going to try and take it off, put some maintenance lube, WD-40, something like that, down it, and see if I can just free it up. So let's get this off. So now I've got this off, you can see it identifies it as vac. You can probably just see it written there, vac in at the top, out there, and this is the vent to atmosphere, and that's where there's like a rubber membrane in there, electromagnet in there, and a shuttle valve that moves up and down. So I believe this is what's sticking. Unfortunately, like I say, you can't take it apart and maintain it, so I'm just going to clean it up a little bit with some brake cleaner. Try actually get it down. Inside there. Might just blow a bit of air through it later, just to clean it up, and also try and clean inside. Clean inside there. Then maybe we'll just try a little bit of lubrication, a little bit of maintenance spray inside as well, because this is a port vent to atmosphere. I'm hoping that this will actually get inside. Worst case scenario is we need to buy a new one and replace it, which is probably what's going to happen. Giving it a clean up, put this back on, see how that affects it, but I say it's a sealed unit, so there's not a lot you can do. Right, let's get it back on. So we're going to go for another test drive now. You can see actually with the ignition off, this is the pulse width PWM signal to the turbo solenoid. You can see it's at 0. So we've got the vacuum at 0, and we've also got the PWM at 0. If I turn the ignition on, you'll see that the PWM goes to 20%. Let's just turn that on there. So it's gone up to 20% now. Obviously the engine's not running, so there's still no vac gauge, but what we know is with a vac gauge, when it's at 25, that will be the equivalent of 100%. So on tick over, you'll see that the PWM signal goes to 55%, and this is actually reading 12.5, which is correct. So if I just start it now, there's a little bit of fluctuation on there, so that's settling there at about 12.5, and the percentage you can see is reading there is 50. So we're in about the right area now, so we'll just go for a test drive. So I went for a short test drive, and we're back to where we were now. It was working okay, that it was actually going up to 25 Hg, and we got a max of about 92% PWM, which would make sense. Then I felt a little bit of a jolt. This has gone to virtually 0, and this is stuck on 20%, which is like a soft reset it needs. So if we turn the engine off, we're off there now, so we're down to 0. If we start it again, there, so we've reset it, and it's back up to about 12.5, and that is reading about 50%, which makes sense. So if I just do a bit of a throttle there, that then drops down to, what's that reading now? That's reading 20%, and that's reading 0. So if we take the throttle back off, so it did seem to make sense. And when it accelerated hard, this went up to about 25 and this went up to 92. So it does making sense. But now what I'm actually thinking now is there a problem that the actual wastegate itself isn't fully closing? So even though the signal to make the boost is working, we're not actually achieving anything. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to change the setting on here, come out of this, and I want to actually find boost pressure. I must have a parameter on here for boost pressure. I would have thought manifold absolute pressure, high resolution. I wonder if that would be it. Let's see what other readings we've got. Measured boost at throttle inlet pressure sensor. Well, that's probably more like it, isn't it? So let's map that. So that's reading 14 at the moment. Let's give it a blip. Yeah, we got it to go up a bit. So got it up to about 15 psi. Not making a lot of difference that, when you think, because normal atmospheric pressure is 14 psi. So if we've gone to 19, we've only actually made 5 psi boost. And I thought maybe it would have took a little bit more than that, half a bar or something like that. But let's see. So if we started up, again now, we're reading what, 14 psi boost. Let's see what the vac does. We've got the soft trip now, you see, because I'm revving it. Hopefully you can hear that, and nothing's happening. So let's turn it off. So you can see the engine's off now, and it's still reading 14.4. Right, so we're now reading 50%. So you would have thought that'd be pulling more than that if I rev it. Right, so you can see as we go along here now, we're on about 14 psi. So I'm going to do a bit of a hard pull, and you'll see it pull up to about 19 psi, and then you'll feel, well, you won't feel the car, but I'll feel the car dip. So I'm going to do a hard pull now. So we're up to about 20 there on the HG. You can see it's pulling up to about 19, and then it's peaked. It now, what did we get to then? We're up to about 18 psi, didn't we? So we're reading a combination here of psi, which is at the inlet pressure, and vacuum. So now I'm happy with the vacuum I'm getting and the pulse width modulation solenoid working. I'm now moving on to the actual wastegate. I want to see I'm getting full activation of the wastegate. Now what I've done is I put it's a bit hard to see because of the sheer crammed inness of this engine, but there's the wastegate rod there with a little nut at the bottom and the bar coming up with a white dot on it. Now the white dot is, if I put a vacuum, apply a vacuum to here, that's where it pulls up to, so it pulls about 1 inch. However, I don't know if I can get to show you too well. But basically what's happening is this, as it pulls up, this isn't operating all the way, and it's actually jamming on the cover here. It's actually jamming on the heat shield. It's hitting that before it's done full travel. So I'm interested to bend that out of the way and see if we can get what full travel actually is. So what I've done now, I've got the vacuum pipe here. If I put a finger over it, that's just that noise. I've got the wastegate there. You can see the white mark of how far it is to move up. and you can see there's two white marks there, and when those two white marks align, the wastegate is fully shut. So if I connect the air supply now, you see it moves there, and that's at 25 Hg. However, if I lift the wastegate, I just get a little bit more closure. So I don't think I'm getting full boost. What I need to do is shorten that rod with that nut there to get those two white marks to line up when it's on full vacuum. So if I put a vacuum on here now, you'll see I can manage to get these two to align. However, in taking all this off, I've managed to break this. This is another Achilles heel, well done Ford. This plastic pipe that returns to the coolant bottle is so brittle and flaky, you just basically fart near it and it snaps off. So I'm going to order another one of those. So I can get it back together, but I can't run it and test it. So time to go for a test drive. It's all back together now. So we've got three things we're monitoring there, which is the absolute boost pressure raw sensor input voltage and the measured boost at the throttle inlet pressure sensor. Those two are linked, and I think basically it's converting the volts to the PSI is my view on it. And then the wastegate is the percentage PWM modulation. So obviously 0 is no demand for boost, and 100% would be full on boost. So obviously as we accelerate, we expect that to go high, and we also expect all of them to go high, to be honest, while we're in boost. So let's go for a little test drive and see how that performs. So just on tick over there, it's obviously shot up to about 80%, then it settles back down to about 50, something like that. You don't usually get much boost just at standstill, you need to be on load. So let's just go find somewhere, get on load. So let's just try pulling second. So it's set off here, you can see it's up to, what's that, 20 psi. So into third. 28, 30 psi, it's pulling. Oh, it's going like a rocket. Oh, this is fantastic. This is much better. So obviously the wastegate wasn't closed. So as a final check, what we'll do, we'll just go through the telemetry. So you can see that was really pulling like a train. Now you've got to remember, even though it got to 30 psi, 14 psi is 1 bar. So 1 bar is natural sort of ambient pressure. So it got to just over 2 bar really. So it was just over about 14 psi boost. And actually, if with the window down, you could hear a good bit of a tsh as it blew off. So let's just exit out of this. Let's go back and see. Let's go run through. Look, no fault codes now. So before it was failing. It was failing on the PCM, which is the powertrain module. So we've cleared the fault. We've got boost. Let's just go for another little run and see how it performs. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and see you soon. So that's the Ecoboost fixed. That's working. So I dare say the actual turbo boost had actually never worked from day one because the wastegate wasn't fully closing. And to be honest, I haven't really driven it far. We've only been doing commuter miles at low speed, so we haven't really done a run on the motorway with it or anything. So I think when my daughter did take it on the motorway, it completely lost power and it was very gutless. Whereas now I think it'll be fine. You can see the fault code's gone away. So excellent, another car fixed. Moving on to the next ones, which will be the ABS fault on the 911. We're going to have a look at that. I think it's a reluctor ring problem, but that'll be the next episode. So please like and subscribe, and we'll see you soon.